Bro.
Heavy rainstorms have unleashed chaos across northeastern Spain, leaving the province of Tarragona devastated and struggling to recover. What began as a routine autumn storm quickly transformed into one of the most destructive flood events the region has ever witnessed. Streets vanished under violent currents of muddy water, and entire neighborhoods were submerged in a matter of hours, shocking both residents and authorities with the scale of the disaster. The storm arrived without mercy. Early in the morning, dark clouds began to thicken over the Ebro Delta, one of Catalonia's most vulnerable lowland areas. Within hours, the skies opened up. Rain poured relentlessly, turning quiet coastal towns into rushing rivers. Meteorologists recorded over 180 millimeters of rainfall per square meter, an amount rarely seen even in the storm-prone Mediterranean basin. As the day went on, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Roads that connected the small municipalities of Ràpita, Godall, and Alcanar became impassable. Cars were swept away, bridges disappeared, and water surged into homes and businesses. Emergency responders described the scene as a wall of brown water, moving through the towns, destroying everything in its path. In Ràpita, one of the most affected areas, the sea appeared to merge with the city. The fishing port, normally bustling with life, was completely underwater. Boats broke loose from their moorings, smashing into one another and into the seawall. Dozens of cars floated aimlessly through flooded streets, while residents watched helplessly from balconies as their town turned into a massive lake. Further inland, the situation in Godall was equally alarming. Torrents of rainwater cascaded down from nearby hills, overwhelming drainage systems and sweeping through the town square. Muddy water entered homes, covering floors, furniture, and personal belongings. The sound of rushing water echoed through the narrow streets, mixing with the sirens of emergency vehicles. By the afternoon, the provincial authorities had declared a state of emergency. Firefighters received continuous calls from residents trapped in their houses or stranded in vehicles. Roads and communication lines were collapsing, and the region's electrical grid began to fail, leaving thousands without power. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Helicopters from the Catalan Emergency Unit were dispatched to assist with evacuations. From the air, the view was shocking. Large sections of Tarragona looked like a sprawling inland sea. The contrast between flooded urban zones and the rising muddy rivers painted a grim picture of how quickly the storm had overpowered human infrastructure. In Alcanar, to the south, the floodwaters were particularly destructive. Video footage showed entire streets swallowed by thick, fast-moving water. Some vehicles were pushed against buildings by the sheer force of the current. Residents were urged to move to higher floors and wait for rescue teams, as roads had turned into raging channels impossible to cross on foot. As the storm intensified, more rain fell in a single evening than the area would typically receive in a month. The Mediterranean air mass feeding the system was unusually humid and warm, fueling intense convective activity. Meteorologists explain that this type of phenomenon, known locally as a gota fria or cold drop, is becoming more frequent due to rising sea temperatures linked to global climate change. During the night, the situation grew even more dangerous. Winds reached over 80 kilometers per hour, pushing the floodwaters further inland. The sound of thunder echoed over the coastline as lightning strikes cut through the darkness. Power outages expanded across Murcia County, and many emergency teams had to operate entirely in the dark. By midnight, the port of La Ràpita was completely inaccessible. Flooded warehouses, overturned boats, and shattered windows lined the waterfront. Authorities set up temporary shelters in schools and sports centers to accommodate evacuees. Hundreds of residents were forced to leave their homes with nothing but the clothes they were wearing. In Godall, rescue crews battled treacherous conditions. Thick mud made it nearly impossible for vehicles to advance. Heavy machinery was brought in to clear debris and open paths to isolated neighborhoods. Firefighters described how the floodwaters were so strong that even their trucks struggled to stay stable on the ground. The next morning revealed the full extent of the devastation. As the rain began to ease, sunlight reflected off endless pools of dirty water stretching as far as the eye could see. The fertile farmlands of the Ebro Delta, once green and productive, were now covered by a layer of mud and destruction. Spain's National Meteorological Agency confirmed that Tarragona had experienced its heaviest rainfall in more than 3 decades. The area's flat terrain, combined with its proximity to the sea, made it particularly susceptible to this kind of disaster. With nowhere for the water to drain, it simply spread, engulfing roads, fields, and homes. The economic impact was immediate. Farmers in the region reported total losses as their crops of citrus, olives, and vegetables drowned under floodwater. Agricultural infrastructure, including irrigation systems and machinery, was destroyed. Early estimates suggested damages exceeding €20 million, though officials warned that the real cost could be much higher. For residents, the aftermath was overwhelming. Streets were coated in thick mud, and the air was filled with the smell of damp wood and sewage. Many homes were uninhabitable, and power restoration took days. Volunteers joined emergency workers to clear debris and distribute food and water. In Alcanar, cars piled up at intersections, crushed together by the force of the flood. Walls had collapsed, sidewalks had been torn apart, and fallen trees blocked the roads. Residents tried to salvage whatever they could, but most returned only to find their houses destroyed. Meanwhile, cleanup operations continued around the clock. The Catalan government coordinated rescue and repair efforts alongside Spain's national authorities. Hundreds of firefighters, military units, and Red Cross personnel worked tirelessly to restore essential services. Helicopters delivered supplies to isolated communities still cut off by the floodwaters. Despite the end of the rain, the risk was not over. Meteorologists warned that the saturated ground could trigger landslides in the coming days. The region remained on alert as emergency teams monitored water levels in nearby rivers. The weather forecast offered little comfort, suggesting possible scattered showers later in the week. Across Tarragona, the damage was visible everywhere. Bridges had collapsed, roads were torn open, and the iconic waterfront areas were covered in layers of sludge and debris. Businesses faced uncertainty as insurance claims flooded in and reconstruction costs mounted. In the days that followed, government officials visited the affected towns, promising aid and long-term recovery plans. The Spanish Minister of Transport described the event as a wake-up call for national infrastructure planning, emphasizing the need for improved flood defenses and drainage systems. Environmental experts echoed the warning, noting that storms of this magnitude are no longer rare. They urged policymakers to adapt urban design and agriculture to the realities of a changing climate. The Ebro Delta, they said, is especially vulnerable due to its low elevation and high exposure to extreme weather. Despite the widespread destruction, the human response was remarkable. Communities came together to help one another. Local volunteers organized food drives, provided temporary shelter, and helped rescue animals stranded by the flood. The sense of solidarity became one of the few bright spots amid the tragedy. Slowly, the waters began to recede. Cleanup crews cleared roads, and the sound of pumps echoed through the towns as water was drained from basements and fields. The first signs of recovery emerged, power lines repaired, public buildings reopened, and the smell of wet earth beginning to fade. Yet the scars of the storm will remain for years. Entire harvests have been lost, thousands of homes must be rebuilt, and the emotional toll on residents runs deep. For many, this flood was not just a natural disaster. It was a reminder of how quickly everything can change. In La Ràpita, as fishermen surveyed the wreckage of their boats, they spoke quietly about resilience and rebuilding. In Godall, families began cleaning their homes, shoveling mud away from doorsteps. And in Alcanar, residents gathered outside damaged buildings, sharing stories of survival and relief that they were still alive. The floods of Tarragona have become a symbol of nature's unpredictable strength. They exposed the fragility of human settlements in the face of extreme weather and the urgent need to prepare for what lies ahead.